When 26-year-old Claire returns to her childhood town to care for her mother, now in a coma after a mysterious fall, she is met with sympathetic smiles, whispered judgments, and a family that insists on keeping secrets for the babies. Sake. Her infant nephew, Oliver, is the silent center of a growing storm, and everyone insists he's too young to notice the tension, the lies, or the coldness that replaced warmth overnight, but Claire remembers everything. What begins as a reluctant stay at her estranged sister's home quickly spirals into a claustrophobic nightmare. Claire starts to suspect that her mother's accident wasn't an accident at all. As she digs deeper, she uncovers buried truths about her sister Julia, her brother-in-law Thomas, and the facade of suburban perfection they cling to. When someone tries to stop Claire from asking questions, by any means necessary, she realizes the danger is much closer than she thought. And Oliver, though just a baby, might be the key to understanding what really happened in that house, because babies notice more than we think. Claire hadn't been back to Fairbridge in nearly 5 years. Not since the funeral. Not since she'd made a silent promise to herself never to walk those sidewalks again or smell the damp sweetness of the honeysuckle that lined her mother's porch. But a call at 2:14 a.m. breaks every vow. Your mother's in the ICU. She fell. It's bad, Julia had said. No greeting, no softness. Claire had blinked at the ceiling in her apartment 3 hours away, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound behind her sister's voice. Then silence. As if Julia expected her to teleport, or vanish entirely. Now, Claire stood in the hospital hallway, smelling antiseptic and loss. The kind that creeps in even before the machines go quiet. Her mother lay behind a glass wall, tubes coiled like vines across her frail chest. The nurse said she might respond to voices. Julia hadn't tried. Claire did a "Hi, Mom," she whispered, fingers ghosting the glass. "It's me." No movement. No flutter. Just the rise and fall of a machine keeping rhythm where breath once lived. She turned to find Julia behind her, holding Oliver, 7 months old, thick curls, impossibly quiet. "He's just a baby," Julia said flatly. "He won't notice what's going on. Don't scare him with this." Claire didn't reply. It wasn't Oliver she was worried about. Back at Julia's house, everything looked polished, curated. Like a catalogue of suburban bliss. Matching mugs, framed quotes about blessings and gratitude, a toy basket so clean it looked untouched. Claire remembered this house differently. Cold tiles. Slammed doors. Whispers behind walls. But Julia had made it a home now, or the version of one you post about. Thomas greeted her at the door with forced warmth. A hug that didn't touch his eyes. "Glad you're here," he said. "You'll help things settle." Julia's been stretched. Claire noted the way his eyes didn't linger on her face too long. Or how Julia flinched slightly when his hand touched her lower back. Just subtle things. But Claire was good at noticing what wasn't said. Dinner was quiet. Oliver sat in his high chair, watching everything with those round, intelligent eyes. He dropped a spoon once. Claire picked it up. He dropped it again, but this time didn't break eye contact. Just stared. She stared back. "You don't have to stay long," Julia said, breaking the silence. "Just until Mom stabilizes. Or, you know." Claire nodded. But she wasn't sure she'd be leaving that soon. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Claire wandered the hallway. She passed Oliver's room first. A soft nightlight cast animal-shaped shadows on the wall. He stirred in his crib but didn't cry. Then her mother's old bedroom, now a makeshift office. Files. Boxes. A locked drawer. Claire tried gently. No luck. Downstairs, the fridge hummed. Claire opened it absently, only to freeze. There were no photos on the fridge. No baby drawings. No sign that Oliver even lived there, except for his room. Everything else was sterile. Controlled. The next morning, she woke to hushed voices downstairs. Julia was whispering furiously to Thomas. "She's already asking questions," Julia said. "You said this would be easy." Claire held her breath, standing just out of sight. Her sister's voice had a sharpness she hadn't heard since high school. "And Thomas didn't respond right away. I said she'd come. I didn't say she'd behave." Claire stepped back, heart racing. The baby's soft babble broke the tension. She turned to find Oliver, standing in his crib, gripping the bars, eyes wide, like he knew something. Claire approached slowly. "You see everything, don't you?" He didn't smile. "Just watched that night." Claire didn't sleep. She waited until the house was still, then crept back to the office. She had a hairpin. A steady hand. The locked drawer clicked open. Inside were envelopes. Photos. A journal with her mother's handwriting, the first page. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." Claire's breath caught. Upstairs, Oliver began to cry for the first time since she'd arrived, and somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard creaked. Claire stared at her mother's journal until the edges of the pages blurred. The air in the office felt thinner now, heavier. The first entry had already shifted something in her gut. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." Written in her mother's distinct cursive. There was no mistaking it. But the next few pages weren't what she expected. No names, no accusations. Just fragments. Reflections. Paranoia laced with restraint. "He's not who she thinks he is. I see the way he watches her when he thinks no one's looking. There are bruises she won't explain on her arms." Once on Oliver, Claire closed the journal. Pulse pounding. Her hand shook slightly as she slid it back into the drawer, relocking it as best she could. She didn't know who he was yet. But she had a guess. The next morning, Claire found Julia in the kitchen, dressed like she was preparing for a PTA meeting. Perfect blouse. Lipstick already on. Toast burning in the toaster. "I couldn't sleep," Julia said without turning around. Claire waited. "I didn't hear Oliver cry again." Julia's shoulders stiffened. "He doesn't cry much." "We're lucky." Claire nodded slowly. "That's not luck. That's training." Julia finally turned, eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Claire shrugged. "Babies cry when something's wrong. When they don't, it usually means they've learned it won't help." Silence stretched between them like a rope about to snap. Then Thomas entered, and the temperature dropped. He kissed Julia on the cheek. Touched Oliver's hair like a reflex. But Claire noticed how the baby's body stiffened ever so slightly at the touch. Thomas turned to her. "You settling in okay?" Claire gave a tight smile. "Starting to feel like home." He smiled back. But his eyes searched her face too carefully, like he was trying to read what she knew. Later that day, Claire visited the ICU again. Her mother's condition hadn't changed. Machines beeped steadily. Tubes still breathing for her. But Claire sat close, took her mother's hand, and whispered, "I read what you wrote. I'm here now. I'll figure it out. I promise." She felt something then, a twitch. Barely a movement. But it was there. The nurse brushed it off as involuntary. Claire wasn't so sure. When she returned home, Oliver was in the living room, alone. Julia was upstairs, probably napping. Thomas nowhere in sight. The baby was staring at the TV, muted. A home video was playing on the screen. Claire stepped closer, confused. It was Julia's wedding, blurry footage. Dancing. Laughter. Claire watched. Thomas on screen, holding Julia close, then turning to the camera. Smiling. But it was the look that followed, right after Julia looked away, that made Claire freeze. The smile dropped. His eyes locked with the camera. Cold. Measured. Like he knew exactly how long to perform. Then Claire heard footsteps. She turned off the TV just as Thomas entered, holding groceries. He glanced at the screen, then at her. Watching the greatest hits? Just trying to remember what this house used to be, she replied carefully. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Again, she went back to the journal. Skipped to the later entries. I tried to talk to Julia. She shut down. She's scared. I know she is. He threatened me. Said I was interfering. I told him I wasn't afraid of him. That was a lie. If anything happens to me, tell Claire. There it was. A name. The first time her mother mentioned her directly, Claire sat in the dark, reading that sentence over and over. If anything happens to me, tell Claire. But no one had told her anything. No one planned to. The next day, she made a plan. She told Julia she needed to pick up a prescription for herself, an excuse Julia didn't question. Claire drove straight to the hospital. She found the attending physician. Asked questions. Pushed. Her mother's fall wasn't consistent with the story she'd been told. No broken banister. No slipped rug. No stairs involved. She'd been found at the bottom of the basement, head trauma, spinal bruising, but no one knew why she'd gone down there in the first place. Claire drove back in silence. She walked into the house and found Thomas in the kitchen. Alone. Washing something red off his hands. Tomato sauce, he said, smiling. Claire didn't ask. She walked straight to Oliver's room. He was awake. Looking at the ceiling, Claire picked him up, holding him close for the first time since she'd arrived. I don't know what you saw, she whispered, but I'm going to make sure they don't lie to you your whole life. Oliver didn't cry. He reached for her necklace instead, her mother's necklace, and held it tight. And down the hall, the office drawer she'd locked so carefully was wide open. The drawer was open. Claire stood in the hallway, clutching Oliver, heartbeat crashing in her ears. She had locked it. She was sure. The journal, gone. Every envelope, every note, every page of her mother's fears. Gone. The footsteps echoed on the stairs. She moved quickly, placing Oliver back into his crib. Calm, like nothing had happened to Julia, appeared at the top of the landing, face tight with forced calm. He keeping you up too? Claire nodded. Couldn't sleep. Julia's eyes flicked past her, toward the office. Just for a second. Just enough. Claire waited until she was gone before checking the office. It was empty now. Not just the drawer, everything. Even the pencil holder was gone. As if someone had swept through and erased her mother's presence from the house overnight, Claire didn't confront Julia. Not yet. She needed proof. Not just feelings, not just looks or gut instincts. If she accused Julia now, she'd be the unstable sister, the one stirring up old family ghosts. The next morning brought an unexpected knock. Claire opened the door to find a woman in her late 50s, salt-colored curls tucked under a faded rain hat. Her eyes lit up when she saw Claire. You're Claire, aren't you? She asked. You've got your mother's eyes. Claire hesitated. Can I help you? I'm Ruth, the woman said. Your mom's neighbor. We used to work at the community center together. I've been calling the hospital for updates. Claire stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She didn't want Julia overhearing. She's stable, Claire said softly. Still unconscious. Ruth nodded slowly, then glanced at the house. She told me to come by if anything ever happened to her. Said you were the only one she trusted. Said there were things she couldn't say over the phone. Claire's stomach turned. What things? Ruth pulled something from her coat pocket. A small flash drive. She said if something ever looked like an accident, I was to give this to you. But only you. Claire took it, fingers trembling slightly. Did she say what was on it? She didn't have to. Claire drove to a coffee shop 10 minutes away. Neutral ground. She opened the drive on her laptop, bracing for something devastating. There were 3 video files. No labels. Just dates. The first was from 4 months ago. It opened on a shaky recording of the kitchen, this kitchen. Claire's mother must have propped her phone in secret. The angle was just high enough to catch the dining table. Julia sat alone, cradling Oliver. Her expression was blank. Tired. She flinched when Thomas entered the room. They argued in low voices. Hard to hear, but Claire could read the tone. Julia said something. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. Oliver started to cry. Thomas stepped toward them, the video cut out. Claire stared at the screen, fists clenched. The second video was shorter. Her mother, sitting in her garden. Talking into the camera, I can't prove anything. Not yet. But I think he's hurting her. I think she's scared to leave. I think she's staying because of the baby. And I think if I say anything, he'll come after me. The last video was different. It was security footage, grainy and green-tinted. Her mother descending into the basement. A shadow moving behind her. Fast. Male. Then the footage glitched. Froze. When it resumed, her mother was on the ground. Claire sat back in her chair, cold seeping into her limbs. She called the hospital. Asked if the footage had been shared with the police. They said no. Julia had insisted it was a simple fall. No need for an investigation. Claire ended the call before her voice could crack. That night, back at the house, Thomas was all charm. Julia laughed too easily. Dinner was a performance again. Claire excused herself early. Sat with Oliver in his room. Rocked him slowly in the dim light. Her phone in her pocket burned with evidence she wasn't ready to use. Not yet, I'm going to get you out of here, she whispered. Oliver made a soft noise, almost like agreement. Then Claire heard something new, downstairs. A second voice. A man. Not Thomas. She placed Oliver back in the crib and crept to the stairs. Julia was in the living room, whispering urgently to someone Claire couldn't see. I told you not to come here. She's watching everything. The man's voice was lower. You said you could handle her. You said she wouldn't dig. Claire leaned forward to see better. The man was standing just inside the front door. Mid-30s. Slender build. Nervous energy, not Thomas, not family, someone else entirely. Claire's mind raced. Who was he? What was he doing here, and why did Julia look like she was about to fall apart? The man stepped toward her. If she finds out what we did. Claire didn't hear the rest because at that exact moment, a door creaked behind her. She turned, and Thomas was standing at the top of the stairs, watching her. Thomas didn't speak, just stood there, barefoot on the landing, one hand resting lightly on the rail, watching Claire as if he'd caught a burglar. His expression was unreadable, too calm to be innocent. Claire didn't flinch. She refused to be the one to break the silence first. I thought I heard something, she said. Finally, Thomas took one slow step down. These old floors creak. She glanced over her shoulder. The front door was closed now. The man was gone. Were you talking to someone just now? She asked. Thomas's gaze didn't move. You must have been dreaming. Claire's jaw tightened. I wasn't asleep. You should be, he said. It's late. Another step down. Then another. Claire nodded and turned away before he reached her. She walked back to Oliver's room, heart hammering. Behind her, Thomas didn't follow, but he didn't go downstairs either. She didn't sleep. The next morning, the atmosphere in the kitchen was wrong. Julia moved like a marionette, lips pressed together, barely speaking. Thomas sipped coffee. Eyes flicking between the two sisters, the tension almost performative now. Claire watched him watching her, and wondered how long they could keep playing this game. I saw someone at the door last night, Claire said casually. Thomas looked up. Did you? Julia didn't. Dark hair, Claire added. Didn't recognize him. Friend of yours? Julia dropped her spoon. No one was here. Thomas smiled slowly. You sure you're not overtired, Claire? You've had a stressful week. We all have. Claire said nothing. Let the silence speak. After breakfast, she returned to the hospital alone. Her mother's condition hadn't changed, but Claire talked. Anyway, they're hiding something, Mom. Julia's scared. And I don't think you fell. I think someone pushed you. She didn't expect a response. But this time, her mother's hand twitched again. A distinct movement. Claire pressed the call button. A nurse came, took her vitals, said the same words as before. Could be a reflex. Claire wasn't convinced. Outside the ICU, she ran into Ruth again. There's something else, Ruth whispered, glancing around. I wasn't going to tell you, but I saw your sister last week. At the pharmacy. With a man who wasn't her husband. Claire felt the ground shift slightly beneath her feet. What did he look like? Ruth hesitated. Dark hair. Thin. Looked nervous. Like he didn't want to be seen. Claire's heart dropped. The man from last night, she said he was helping with the baby, Ruth added. But he never looked at the child. Claire thanked her and left. Back at the house, she went through her mother's contacts, trying to find anything. A name. A number. Something connected to this man. Most of it was useless. But one name stuck out, Nathan Rowe. A contact saved under "Not for Julia." Claire searched the name. No local ties. But there was a record from 10 years ago. A restraining order filed by her mother. The details were sealed. Claire stared at the screen, numb. Whoever Nathan was, her mother had once feared him enough to involve the courts. And now Julia was meeting with him behind Thomas's back. That night, Claire didn't eat. She stayed upstairs, pretending to sleep. Around midnight, she heard the front door open again. Soft voices. The creak of the floor. She moved quietly to the hallway and saw Julia standing by the door. Arguing with Nathan in whispers. I told you not to come here, Julia hissed. It's not safe. Nathan sounded desperate. You said you needed help. I do. But not like this. If Thomas sees you, he won't. I parked down the block. Claire filmed them from the shadows. Just enough for a face. Just enough for proof. Nathan stepped closer. Does she know about the test? Julia glanced over her shoulder. She's suspicious, but no. Not yet. Claire's blood ran cold. What test? She whispered to herself. Suddenly, Oliver cried out from his room, a loud, piercing wail. The first real cry Claire had heard since she arrived. The house froze. Julia rushed upstairs. Nathan vanished into the night. Claire went to Oliver's room too. Julia was already there, picking him up, whispering apologies. Claire stepped inside. What test was he talking about? Julia turned sharply. Stay out of it, Claire. I'm already in it, she snapped. You're sneaking around with a man tied to a restraining order Mom filed a decade ago. You're hiding journals. Lying to your husband. Don't tell me to stay out. Julia's face crumbled for a moment. Something flickered, fear, maybe guilt. Then she said, you don't know what it's like. Living with someone who watches everything. Who decides what's real and what's not. You mean Thomas? Claire asked. Julia didn't answer. Claire stepped closer. What test? Julia looked down at Oliver. Then at Claire, and whispered, the paternity test. Everything inside Claire dropped. Oliver. Not Thomas's child. 1,000 questions exploded in her head, but none louder than the single one that changed everything. If Thomas ever found out, what would he do? The paternity test. The words lodged themselves in Claire's chest like a splinter she couldn't pull free. She stared at Julia, waiting for her to walk it back. To say she was tired or confused. But Julia didn't. She clutched Oliver tighter, and her silence told Claire everything she needed to know. Thomas wasn't Oliver's father. Claire sat down on the edge of the crib. How long have you known? Julia looked at the floor. Since before he was born. Claire blinked. And you stayed? Julia's laugh was hollow. What was I supposed to do? Tell Thomas the truth and risk him reacting the way he always does? I couldn't. He was already controlling everything, what I wore, who I spoke to, how often I saw Mom. He didn't need a reason to get angry before. If he found out Oliver wasn't his, she trailed off. Claire leaned in. You think he'd hurt the baby? I don't think, Julia said, voice shaking. I know. They sat in silence, Oliver nestled between them, unaware of the storm swirling around his name. Claire looked at him, his soft curls, his tiny hand clinging to Julia's shirt. He wasn't just a baby. He was the secret everyone was fighting to either protect or destroy. You need to leave him, Claire said. Julia shook her head instantly. He'll never let me go. He watches everything. He has cameras. I don't even know where half of them are. And now you're here, stirring things up. Claire stood. Stirring things up? Julia, Mom is in a coma because she tried to help you. She was trying to protect Oliver. You told Nathan to come back into your life. You lied to me about everything. I was trying to survive, Julia snapped. You left. You got to start over. I didn't. Claire took a breath. Then let's fix it. Now. While we still can. The door creaked. Julia froze. Claire turned. Thomas stood in the hallway again. He looked at the two of them with Julia's tear-streaked face, Oliver between them, Claire standing with fire in her eyes, and he smiled. You girls staying up late again? He asked, voice smooth as glass. Claire moved first. We were just talking. Sounded more like yelling. Julia didn't speak. She didn't move. Claire realized then just how deep the fear ran. Thomas had broken something in her that didn't bleed, but never healed. We're tired, Claire said, stepping in front of Julia. We'll go to bed. Thomas's smile never faltered. Of course. But as Claire passed him, she noticed something in his hand. A small piece of plastic. A baby monitor. He'd been listening, all of it. The next day passed in a daze. Julia barely spoke. Thomas acted as if nothing had changed, making eggs, reading the paper, even offering to watch Oliver while the sisters got some air. Claire declined. Firmly, she needed to act. She uploaded the video footage of Julia and Nathan to a secure drive. Made copies of her mother's files from the flash drive. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. Not unless Julia was ready to take the final step that evening. She cornered her sister in the laundry room, one of the few places without a camera. She'd checked. You have to leave with me tonight. Julia's face crumpled. I can't. He knows, Julia. He hurt us. He's not going to wait. He's going to do something. What if he takes Oliver? Claire didn't blink. Then we take him first. Julia looked at her, eyes full of old wounds and reluctant hope. You'd help me? Claire didn't hesitate. Yes. We're not letting him grow up in this house. We're not letting him become another story whispered over coffee after something awful happens. That night, they packed quietly. Just the essentials. Oliver's birth certificate. Diapers. Cash Ruth had quietly handed Claire earlier. A burner phone. They waited until Thomas left for his night run. He always jogged at 9, same route, headphones in.at907. They were halfway to the car.at909. The headlights flared behind them. He hadn't gone running, he'd been watching. Julia screamed as Thomas slammed the car door shut. Claire threw herself between them. What are you doing? He asked, too calm. Going somewhere? Claire didn't answer. Thomas stepped forward. "That's my son." Julia's voice cracked. "No, he's not." The silence after that sentence was deafening. Claire saw it, the flicker of rage, the fracture of control. He lunged, she was ready, she hit him with the tire iron she'd stashed beneath the seat hours earlier. He collapsed, groaning, not unconscious, but bleeding. Furious, they didn't wait. Julia jumped into the back seat with Oliver. Claire drove as she didn't look back, not until they reached the motel an hour away. Not until she heard Oliver giggle for the first time since she'd arrived. A soft, curious laugh. Claire sat down beside him. "You noticed everything, didn't you?" she whispered. He blinked up at her, and behind them, Julia's phone lit up with a new message from an unknown number. "You think this is over?" The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and disinfectant. A queen bed, one flickering lamp, and a window that wouldn't lock properly. Claire hadn't slept. Julia hadn't stopped checking the parking lot. Oliver was the only one who seemed calm, finally able to stretch, babble, and reach without flinching. The text still hovered on Julia's phone screen. "You think this is over?" Claire had yanked the battery out instantly. "No more digital trails," she told her sister. They switched to the burner phone Ruth gave her. No data, no apps. Only voice and text that morning. Claire drove to a gas station 20 miles out to use the payphone. She called a contact from her old life, a friend from college who now worked in child advocacy law. Her voice was hesitant at first, then serious. "You need a custody petition immediately," the friend said. "If Thomas is not the biological father, he has no legal claim unless there was an adoption. But Julia needs to file before he does. The longer you wait, the harder it gets." Claire took notes, heart pounding. "We have a video of him threatening behavior. A journal from their mother documenting abuse. Witnesses. And the paternity test. Then file for emergency custody now, before he twists the story." Claire returned to the motel to find Julia sitting on the floor, knees pulled up to her chest. "He knows where we are," she whispered. Claire's stomach dropped. "What? How?" "I don't know. But I woke up this morning and the window was open. I locked it before bed. I swear I did." Claire scanned the room. No broken glass. No forced entry. But something was off. They moved motels immediately. That night, Julia told Claire something she hadn't shared before. "I met Nathan before I even met Thomas. We were just kids. It was intense. Dangerous. My parents hated him. He left town. And then when Thomas and I started dating, I never told him about Nathan. I thought it didn't matter." Claire waited. "Then one day, Nathan came back. Right after I got pregnant. He didn't know I was married. Said he'd never stopped thinking about me. I panicked. Told him to stay away. But he didn't." Julia shook her head. "No. He showed up at Mom's house. That's why she filed the restraining order. Not for herself, for me. I didn't even know she'd done it until years later." Claire rubbed her eyes. "So Nathan's not some criminal. He just thought Oliver was his. I don't even know if he is. I never had a test done. Julia's voice broke. "I just needed to believe someone could love Oliver without controlling him." Claire leaned back against the wall. "So no one knows who Oliver's father really is?" Julia shook her head. They sat in silence, listening to Oliver's soft breath from the crib. It was the only sound that kept Claire from unraveling. The next morning, they met with Claire's college friend in a quiet county courthouse, far from Fairbridge. Julia filled out paperwork with trembling hands. Claire submitted the journal pages and the video files. The lawyer said they had a strong case, if they could stay in one place long enough, but even that day, the motel phone rang twice. no one on the line. And that night, someone knocked at the door at 3 a.m. Claire didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the bed with the tire iron in one hand and Oliver cradled in the other. She whispered into the dark, "You're safe. I promise." But she didn't believe it. The next morning, they went to a domestic shelter instead of another motel. No names. No calls. Just locked doors, shared meals, and eyes that had seen similar things. It was the first place that felt still, until Claire got a letter. No return address, inside, a single photograph: Oliver, on the swing set. In Julia's backyard. Taken weeks ago. Before the fall. Before the journal. Before the unraveling. On the back, scrawled in thick ink, "He looks just like me. Don't you think?" And Claire stared at the note, then passed it to Julia. Julia stared at it for a long time. Then said, "He was never supposed to come back." Claire folded the photo in half, eyes dark. "We need a DNA test. Now." Julia didn't argue, but something about the handwriting stayed with Claire. It didn't match the old letters in the journal. It didn't match anything Nathan had written when they compared documents. That night, Claire waited until Julia fell asleep. She went back through her mother's journal, the scanned pages she had stored, and found something new. And the final entry, buried in a margin, written in shaky, deliberate letters: "If anything happens to me, it won't be Nathan. Watch. Thomas." Claire's blood ran cold, and behind her, Oliver began to see why it wasn't Nathan. Claire read the final journal entry 3 times. The words didn't make sense at first, then they made too much sense. Her mother hadn't been afraid of the past. She was afraid of what Julia had brought into her future. Thomas, the name now thudded in her skull like a drum. All the signs she'd missed, or ignored, or rationalized. The baby monitor in his hand. The silence in Oliver's cries. The unspoken tension every time Julia was near him. And now this, her mother's last warning. Scrawled not for the police. Not for Julia, but for Claire. She waited until sunrise before showing Julia. The shelter kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. The women at the far table whispered softly to each other while toddlers colored with broken crayons. Claire slid the journal across the table. Julia's hands shook as she turned the page. "I don't understand," she said, eyes wide. Why? Would she say that? Why now? Claire didn't answer. She waited. Julia's voice cracked. "Nathan sent the photo." "No," Claire said quietly. "He didn't." She took out the letter again. Held it beside a grocery list Thomas had written weeks ago, back at the house. Side by side, the handwriting was a perfect match. Julia stared. She said, "Nathan came back," Claire said. But what if he didn't? What if that was Thomas's lie, planted just deep enough to make her question herself? What if every threat we thought came from outside actually came from inside our house? "No," Julia said again, softer this time. "He wouldn't." Claire leaned forward. "Why haven't we been able to find Nathan? No activity. No ID trail. No sightings, even at his old address. What if Thomas made him disappear?" Julia froze. What if the restraining order wasn't to keep Nathan away from you, but to keep Thomas from getting to him? Claire opened her laptop and pulled up the restraining order details again. This time, she searched deeper, into the lawyer's notes. There was a single comment added in handwriting, likely by her mother: "He won't stop. He's obsessed with control," and next to that, T.not N. Julia whispered, "She tried to protect all of us." "She did," Claire said. "And you can finish what she started." That night, they drove back not to the house, but to the hospital. Their mother's condition had stabilized slightly. No longer in a coma, but still barely responsive. The doctors called it a slow awakening. Claire leaned close to the bed. "Mom. We know now. We know it was Thomas. We know you tried to stop him." And for the first time, her mother blinked, just once, enough, they filed a formal police report the next morning. Brought everything: videos, journal entries, handwriting samples, the hospital's injury records. Claire's friend from the advocacy center arranged for a safe house and emergency protection. Thomas hadn't reached out again. Not directly, but a car had followed them twice. A gray SUV, windows tinted, never close enough to prove anything, but always there. That night, Claire took Oliver into the bedroom early. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. She held him close, whispering stories into the dark, anything to keep her own fear from leaking into him, and just after midnight, the safe house alarm went off. Glass shattered. Julia screamed from the next room. Claire grabbed the tire iron again and ran. The front door had been kicked open. Thomas stood in the entryway, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, eyes wild, hands empty, but Claire didn't trust them to stay that way. "You took everything," he said, breath ragged. "You lied to me." Julia stood between him and Oliver's crib, body shaking. "You lied to yourself." Claire moved behind him. Slowly. "You don't even know if he's yours," Thomas snapped. "You think they'll believe you? You think they care?" He lunged. Claire swung. The tire iron cracked against his shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Julia screamed, covering Oliver's ears. A neighbor burst in, followed by the police. Thomas didn't resist arrest. He just looked at Claire and said, "He's just a baby. He won't remember." Claire stared at him. "No," she said, "but I will." The next day, Julia was granted emergency custody. A DNA test was finally ordered. Claire sat beside her as the swab was taken, watching Oliver giggle at the nurses. "Gloves, do you want to know who the father is?" Claire asked gently. Julia looked at her son. "No," she said. "He's mine. That's all that matters." Claire nodded, but later that night, when Julia was asleep, Claire opened the envelope anyway, and what she saw inside would change everything. Claire stared at the paper. It was smaller than she expected. A simple white envelope with her name typed cleanly across the front. Inside, one sheet. 2 columns. 3 names. Claire's name. Julia's name, and Oliver's, but there was a 4th, under paternity test results. The words were quiet. Cold. Final. Alleged father. Claire's father. She read it twice before the meaning hit. Not Thomas, not Nathan, their father. Claire dropped the paper like it had burned her. The air around her felt different now. Thinner. Meaner. She stood in the hallway, heart pounding. When she finally walked back into the room, Julia was rocking Oliver, humming a tune Claire hadn't heard since childhood, something their mother used to sing when the lights went out. Claire sat down across from her. "You should see this," she said, sliding the paper forward. Julia read it once, then again. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she simply whispered, "I thought I was careful. I thought I was the only one." Claire's chest tightened. "You knew?" "I suspected. But he died before I could ever say it out loud. Before I could ask what I'd been too afraid to know." Claire looked down at Oliver. He stared up at both of them, content, completely unaware of the weight hanging between his mother and aunt. "What does this mean?" Claire asked softly. Julia didn't answer right away. She stared at Oliver for a long time. Then said, "It means he's not your nephew. He's your brother." The room was quiet outside. A siren passed, then silence again. Claire ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. "Did Mom know?" "She knew something," Julia said. "She knew enough to keep us safe after he died. But not enough to stop the spiral. She was always watching for who would become him. And it was never Nathan. It was Thomas. Because the monster didn't leave with Dad. He just changed faces." Claire leaned forward. "You need to tell Oliver someday." Julia nodded. "I will. When he's old enough to understand that the people who made him don't define who he becomes." Claire reached for Oliver's hand. He gripped her finger, strong and sure. Later that week, Thomas was officially charged with assault, unlawful surveillance, and obstruction. The court date was set. Julia was granted full custody under a protective order. And the paternity test remained sealed, by her choice. The shelter helped them transition into a long-term housing program. Claire used her savings to co-sign the lease on a small duplex just outside town. A yard. A lock on every door. A fresh start. On their first night in the new home, Julia placed a baby monitor on the nightstand, not to surveil, but to protect. Claire tucked Oliver into his crib and paused. She whispered, "You noticed everything. But you didn't say anything. You didn't have to." Julia stood in the doorway. "You're not just his sister," she said. Claire looked up. "You're the first safe person he's ever known." Claire didn't answer. She didn't need to, but in the quiet, in the space where secrets had once ruled, something had changed. Truth had burned away the silence, and what remained was fragile, but real. Claire stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool night air wrap around her. She thought about her father. About Thomas. About the legacy of men who confused control with love. And she thought about Oliver, no longer just a baby, but a bridge between generations. Between mistakes and the chance to do better. Back inside, she heard him cry softly, not in fear, just a child's call, and this time, Julia went to him first.